Hi, today I would like to tell you something about the early metabolic syndrome. Those of you who join my courses know already quite something about it, but there's more. There are more aspects of it, especially with regard to safety. So I just put you on the screen to start the presentation. So again, I would like to start with the interstitial changers. The interstitium is the space between cells, blood vessels, lymphatic channels, everything that is organic or a vessel or any other structure in our body is surrounded by interstitial water. And in fascia, we call it matrix, the collagen fibers, the fascia fibers, they are embedded in a matrix we also call interstitium. And the interstitium is more and more recognized as an organ that needs to be regulated, especially in fascial therapy. Basically, it's also the metabolic bridge between the connective tissue in the blood vessels, the capillaries that exchange gas and nourish the tissues. And the flow between the matrix or the interstitium and the blood vessels guarantees the supply of nutritional molecules and also the detoxification, the elimination of substances we no longer need. So we have to have this regular flow going on to guarantee that we have a growth state, that we have a regulative state. And we can also work with shear forces, with many other techniques, but you will see later on that all these conditions are also influenced by the autonomous nervous system. So we need to care for the autonomous nervous system first before we go into structures. The molecules or the structures that care for the viscosity of this matrix so that water can flow, they are called proteoglycans. It's a combination of a protein and a sugar chain, and they look a bit like bottle brushes. You know, the brushes you use to clean your milk water bottles for the kids or whatever. They look like these brushes, and at every small ending, they can bind water molecules. So they are capable of binding water and increasing the viscosity in the matrix. And if the amount of proteoglycans increases, there's more water in a crystalline or bound form, and then there's a stuck of flow. There's more swelling. It's already a local inflammation. And then there's more stasis, there's more stop of metabolism, stop of flow, and this is a devil's cycle. And then the local inflammations can turn into a generalized edema. And this can also affect the brain. Basically, the regulation of these proteoglycans can be done by our quiescent cells, by the endothelial cells of the blood vessels. I've referred to this later on again. Some years ago, 20, 30 years ago, there was a lot of discussion about the metabolic syndrome, which was supposed to be a combination of conditions in the body that led to high blood pressure and cardiovascular diseases. The end constitution was an atherosclerosis or atherosclerosis, the plaques in the blood vessels. But this is why I call this the early metabolic syndrome. The disbalanced condition doesn't start with plaques, it starts very early. It starts earlier. It starts at the beginning of the stock of water. When the water flow, the supply of nutrients, and the waste disposal is compromised, then the early metabolic syndrome starts. So this is just an irritation of water flow, of fluid exchange between the matrix and the blood vessels. And also the gut mucosa, which is usually a closed cell layer. This can also be compromised in that way that the cells are no longer connected, but there are gaps in it, and this is how we call it, a leaky gut syndrome. The leaky gut means there are holes in the gut mucosa, and this also has the effect that molecules are no longer like nutrients find their place of metabolism and then being transported through the body to the places where they have to go, but proteins are just coming over the mucosa and going into the small vessels, into the capillaries, and the body doesn't know what to do with them. So also an inflammation reaction at that place. Coming back to the endothelial cells, we call them quiescent cells because usually if everything works fine, if we have a balanced state, they are in GO, in G0 phase, which means there's no cell division, there's no metabolism, and they have this dynamic stillness. The dynamic stillness just says they sit there and wait until they're needed. So, there's always a bit of regulatory reactions going on in the body. We need to regulate all over. And if they can handle it, if they are in that green phase of acting, then there's no problem. Problem starts when the fluids are stuck. There's no flow, there's no fluid flow into the vessels, or let's say it's diminished. And then they get in the alarm state and they can be overloaded. And the effect is that there will be, from the local little inflammation, a systemic inflammation. And looking at coronavirus, you know that this virus is supposed to attack the endothelium. And if you have overloaded endothelial cells that can't regulate anymore, you could imagine that the virus has direct access to the organs, which means severe conditions. So these regulatory cells usually act as gatekeepers of the endothelium and organize that immune cells, that leukocytes come to this place, and they open the pores and they get into the vessels and they repair the little vessels, the endothelium again, and there's normal regulation and there's normal flow again. The state I described, when everything is in flow, we call it homeostasis, and this is organized by a structure in the brain called hypothalamus. And the The medical field talks about the ergotrophic state, which means in a neurologic basis, it's a sympathetic state. You know this expression probably more, and the hormonal state. On the sympathetic side, you know that this is a defense state, and there's increased activity in muscles and musculoskeletal system. So energy is needed, and there's a catabolic metabolism, which means bigger molecules reserve the stock of nutrients is catabolized to get more energy. So there's an immune suppression because in the adrenal gland, everything is on activation. Adrenaline, noradrenaline is secreted, and in the long term, if this happens quite often, then we get a higher cortisol level. This is the long-term hormone, and at the end we come back to low levels of cortisol. But this is a pathologic state because it's we call it burnout, because the adrenal gland isn't even capable of producing cortisol. So this state causes an immune suppression, and the collagen synthesis is decreased, and we get this oxidative stress, and the NFK beta factor, which is a factor that shows us that the DNA is on a regular basis producing structural proteins, and cell division is taking place, and all the cytokines are secreted to get this metabolism running. So this is all decreased, and it's also decreased tissue repair. So this is the ergotrophic state. And on the other hand side, in the blue area here, we have the trophotropic state, where the body can grow, where the cells can divide, where stock molecules can be built up to create stock for dangerous for these states, but they should be only just temporarily. The rhythm of the two is the crucial thing. We need to get back to this rhythm, and there should be more blue states in our life than red states. But in these states, we have more the red states than the blue states. So the parasympathetic state, where the growth factors are secreted and the collagen synthesis is increased. This is a state where only regulation and healing can take place. So the first thing we have to do is to get the client or the patient in the parasympathetic state. And no matter how you work, it's really the first thing and the basis for our work these days is having regulatory conditions in the body. And in this stage also the liver can work quite well, and there can be a management of small regulations. And we see so many not systemic but local inflammations in all parts of the bodies. People coming with chronic tooth inflammation, with inflammations in their knees or in their back. So this is already a state where the body can't regulate to a full parasympathetic state, and the chronic states, which is shown in this chart, the chronic states can cause many more severe conditions, or it expands the there's also much more chronotropic, pathologic, or chronic pathomechanisms taken place, especially in the cardiovascular area, or in a metabolic area like diabetes, or in a neurologic area when the nerves are attacked, or the autoimmune disorders, which are, to my point of view, just a reaction the body does because it builds antibodies against inflamed tissue cells, which means he's really in a bad shape and he doesn't know what to do. So if we have stress or trauma or also processed food and sugar on a body basis, on a nutritional basis, then the fluid flow goes down and we get this endothelial inflammations, and this causes to chronic inflammation. It's just a summary of what we're talking about. So to me, and that's the bottom line, it's nothing new. It's just to stress again, we need the client first in a safe state. First, we need to have that pleasant atmosphere for the client. Then we need to regulate our own system, our own nervous system. We need to be in a parasympathetic state, a very calm state when we meet the client. And we have hopefully good relationships with clients that makes a heart-to-heart connection easy. And then we settle their nervous system, and then we can start the session. I mean, this is just the preparation. First, we prepare by this pleasant atmosphere and regulating our own state. Then we attune with the client system, and then we regulate the nervous system through the interpersonal neurobiology, and then we can start with restoring metabolic structures or organs or any other thing you want to do in this session. So safety and parasympathetic state is really very important. It's the crucial thing we should do. Okay, that was it for today. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you got some new points for your sessions, and thank you. Stay healthy. Bye.